Hi, Dr. Peterson. So I'm actually a Coptic Orthodox and Egyptian, so I found your talk today incredibly interesting. I've also taken a deep interest in the early church fathers, and as you were talking about hierarchies, I hearken back to St. Athanasius and the idea of theosis that you brought up last time, that God became man so that man can become like God. So I was thinking about this in terms of the hierarchies, and is that an example of how the top of the pyramid, the hierarchy, sort of gets inverted or descends to the bottom and brings it up and to the top, and that's sort of an attraction of Christianity? That's sort of made Christianity such a powerful idea. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, it's certainly one of the, it's certainly one of the things that made not just Christianity a powerful idea, because one of the things that happened, this was called the democratization of Osiris, if I remember correctly. And like what happened, see if I can answer this question using this approach for a sec. Is that going to work? I don't know if I can answer that question that way. The part of the attraction of Christianity, but this was something that emerged across time, was the notion that even if you were in a lowly position, that there was something about you that was akin to the divine. And now, you might say, well, that's just wish fulfillment. That's what Freud would say. That's what Marx would say, right? The opiate of the masses. I tweeted yesterday something I thought was pretty funny, which was that like religion was the opiate of the masses, but that Marxism was the methamphetamine of the masses. So I think the attraction was that it allowed people to recognize their intrinsic dignity. And one of the things I've been thinking about is the juxtaposition between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, because what happens in Genesis 2 is that human beings collapse and fall, right? And then we're these fallen creatures that know evil. But in the beginning, in Genesis 1, it's really an optimistic story because it says, well, we're the sorts of creatures that partake in the calling forth of being from chaos. And that's in our essential nature. And to some degree, if you juxtapose both of those, it's as if that's the entire biblical story rammed together in the first two chapters, which is partly why we're taking so long to get through this, by the way, is that to return to Genesis 1 is the antidote to Genesis 2. It's like to continue to act out the doctrine that you're made in God's image. And that means that you're capable of speaking good being into existence through truth. And that's also the antidote to the fall, which I think is actually the fundamental narrative message of the entire biblical structure. And I also think of Western civilization, for that matter. So there's a nobility, and this is also why I think Nietzsche was fundamentally wrong in his criticism of Christianity, because he thought about it as slave morality. You know, the vengeance of the bottom against the top. That's more historical than theological. It's like it gives dignity. It illuminates the dignity of the human being. And it requires responsibility. So it's not just wish fulfillment. It's not Freudian wish fulfillment. The Freudian theory, which I thought about a lot, is not tenable in my estimation. It also doesn't account for the existence of hell. Because if it's only wish fulfillment, why bother with hell? I mean, it's a lot more, if you're really going to just fulfill a wish, it's like everybody gets to go to heaven no matter what they do. You don't have hell, which was, of course, something absolutely terrifying to medieval Christians, and to plenty of people now, for that matter. So it's the nobility, it's the idea of the nobility that I think is deeply attractive to people. And that's all there is. I mean, what you have to fight against your worm-like, fragile, mortal existence is the possibility of transcending that with nobility of speech and act. That's what you have. And who can hear that without feeling ennobled by that? Now, you might say, well, you might shudder and say, well, I can't bear the responsibility. It's like, well, fair enough, man. You know, I mean, that's a reasonable criticism, but the consequence of not bearing the responsibility is, that's hell, really. So.
Thank you.